audio logs and listened to them, you would know that, and you might have interpreted that as indicating that this is an option that might be available to you. So giving you the chance to try it gives us the chance to tell you that no, it is not an option that is available. By the way, this option was added in response to comments from Activision headquarters. Good piece of feedback from them. I don't know if this is the stereotype in Australia, but Dan, our creative lead, likes to joke that the reason that they thought of trying to resolve the situation without fighting is that they're in California and we're in New York. All right, so much for the player's options. But these aren't the end of the scene. There are other elements in paying it off dramatically. In particular, we saw a combat scene on both branches, but only the anti-registration side actually chooses its position by attacking. The pro-event didn't even have a combat on the pro-registration side, which, as you might imagine, was a little anticlimactic when you went and you hit the button and you were done. So that's where this guy comes in. If you're not a comics fan, you probably don't recognize Patriot. He's basically a young analog of Captain America, which is why he's in this scene representing Captain America's view. That's not only appropriate, he was basically available, which was nice. He appears later in the game as a mini-boss in the ambush mission on the registration side. Of course, that was near the end of Act 2, which caused its own problem. Patriot is far too powerful for you to fight at the end of Act 1. So this did create some extra work for our combat systems designers to put together a version of him that was appropriately powered at this point in the game. All right, even having introduced combat on both sides, they weren't equivalent. Remember, at the start of the scene, Patriot isn't there. If you're the sort of player who likes to solve problems with his fists, there's really only one target for you. It's possible that this is one factor that skewed our players to the anti-registration side. And skewed they were. You made the right choice. You knew you would. Lots of players chose the anti-registration faction, at least at first. We would have liked it to have been a little bit more even. It's hard to tell exactly, but one way to get estimates is from the Xbox Live achievement data. There were a few achievements for playing certain missions, and some of those were on the branches of Act 2. And there's also achievements for replaying the game on legendary difficulty, which is only unlocked after you've done your first playthrough. The split between anti-registration and pro-registration achievements was about 70-40. 70 before you got up to 100, which is good, because it means that at least some people clearly played both branches. It's not possible to know whether that was only 10% or as high as 40%. We do know that the 20% of players who replayed on legendary difficulty were probably fairly likely to try the other side, but it's all guesswork when you get to that point. You could certainly replay on legendary difficulty without changing sides, or vice versa. There's even less to know for sure about why this preference exists, though there's many theories. We've got a largely teenage and young adult audience, and teenagers are not well known for submitting to authority. Also, the anti-registration side is the easy one to join in the sense that you join it with your fist and you are playing a video game. And regardless of the arguments on both sides, Captain America's got it on symbolism. When you've got a choice between the guy who is wearing the flag, especially if you are an American, and the guy who's wearing a machine, who are you going to trust? Finally, the whole scene that we put you in mirrors the encounter between Captain America and Maria Hill. And that's kind of unfortunate, because if you're at all sympathetic to Captain America, some part of you is saying unconsciously, okay, in this scene, I'm playing the part of Captain America. Now, having planned ahead for the use of Patriot in this scene, a different analogy to that earlier scene might have occurred to us. If Patriot had been in the scene from the very start, then it would still mirror the scene with Captain America and Maria Hill, only he would be in the role of Captain America, not you. And you couldn't be there because he was already there. And players who just wanted to punch someone would have two choices of who to punch. That might have worked better. Who knows? We didn't try it, didn't think of it in time. Too late now. All right, how are we doing for time? Okay. All right, that's it for picking apart this 1 2-minute scene. talk about the consequences of the scene. It affects several game mechanics. The first three, roster, equipment, and passive abilities, are separate because they relate directly to your characters. I put achievements separately. I consider them to be a game mechanical issue because scoring is, but they're very different. There's one thing that you don't see that we would have liked to have done, which is powers. Each character has 4 powers. We would have liked to have been able to do 5 per character. You can imagine a system where by the point where you choose, you've got only your first 3 powers, and your 4th one depends on your choice. Passive abilities would serve that role instead. We simply didn't have the capacity in our powers team to do all those powers because they were working on fusion attacks like that you saw earlier, where Spider-Man gets to throw Wolverine at somebody. So this was a trade-off. We wanted fusion, we couldn't have the number of powers. Let's look at the other mechanisms individually. Roster, equipment, character abilities, energy. Alright, so there's your roster. There's essentially just 3 player characters who are exclusive to each side with direction of activity. There's the faction leaders, Captain America, Iron Man, and some associated characters. This is actually a pretty minimal set. It was the least we could get away with, even though a number of other characters chose one side or another in the comics. The reason for this is that our number of playable characters was a big selling point for us, and we didn't want to restrict too many of them. Comic fans would know that we were deviating from the comics, but then Marvel is very good about what-if scenarios, which is one of the great things about working with them. So in addition to the obvious, your roster also affects what teams you can form. You get bonuses for certain selections, and they may be unavailable based on which characters you have. The characters who are locked out on one side appear as enemies for the other side, and your enemies are obviously going to be different when you change mission branches. That has game mechanical effects because of boosts. Boosts are equipment. Every good RPG has to have equipment. We are not talking about equipment like swords and shields and armor, because Iron Man and Captain America have their own armor and shield, and we can't really do that. They're represented instead as medals. They affect the whole team. But drops from mini-bosses is one of the main ways to get them. You're not going to get this boost unless you fight She-Hulk, here. In addition, there's a number of statistics for each character, for each playable character, called heroic deeds. Think of these as character-specific achievements or trophies. For example, Daredevil can get a boost by defeating Bullseye and Molten Man. Bullseye in particular is an arch-enemy of Daredevil's. Well, Bullseye does not appear on the pro registration side. The Invisible Woman can get a boost by doing enough high-scoring fusions with Mr. Fantastic, who's her husband. He is, of course, locked out on the anti-registration side. And then there's passive abilities. Passive abilities are like powers. They're on your character sheet. They affect your capabilities, but they affect them in mostly a mathy, non-special effectsy kind of way. So they're much cheaper. Here, for example, one of Spider-Man's passive abilities gives him bonuses to his melee damage, and that is exclusive to pro registration. Each character has 6 of these. 2 of them you have unlocked from the start. Another 2 depend on your registration choice. Of course, there's achievements. I don't really need to say much about achievements. They're tied to missions, but they also can be tied to acquisition of boosts and acquisition of costumes, which is another thing that heroic deeds can do for you. I'll note parenthetically, we actually also had a branching ending for the game, but it was a very, very slight difference. We wanted to bring the story back together. We branched the ending only enough to respect the choice that the player had made, and no more. So the Superhuman Registration Act has to give a little bit in either case, bring the characters back together, but it's just a question of how much. All right, so regardless of all of the game mechanical consequences of your choice, I claim that the decision is still mainly one about values. It's a moral choice, and it is effective primarily for that reason. The game mechanical consequences add tension to your decision, but they don't drive it. We don't even give you enough information to make a truly utilitarian choice. So that's not the way that the players were choosing. In fact, we polled playtesters before the Civil War, and those who expressed a preference tended to like playing as Iron Man. but a strong majority